My fiancée demanded 30% of my business for her parents or she'd cancel our wedding, but what I said next ended her family's empire forever. I, 34 male, don't usually post long stories like this, but after everything that happened, I need to get this off my chest. This all went down over the past year and a half, and man, what a wild ride it's been. Buckle up because this is going to be a long one. I run a custom furniture workshop in Portland. Nothing fancy like restoration hardware, but people pay good money for my handcrafted pieces. I started this business 8 years ago with just $3,500 I'd saved from working construction. I bought some second-hand tools, rented a tiny workshop space in a sketchy part of town, and worked my ass off. The first couple years were brutal. I'd wake up at 5 a.m., work till midnight, eat ramen or whatever was on sale, and crash on the cot I kept in my workshop to save rent money. No vacations, barely any social life, and definitely no fancy dinners. I remember once having to choose between buying wood for a commission piece or paying my phone bill. I chose the wood and had no phone for 2 weeks. Looking back, I'm not sure how I survived those early days. The workshop was this dingy converted garage with terrible insulation. In winter, I'd wear 3 layers and could still see my breath. In summer, it was like working in a sauna. I had one small fan that just pushed around hot air. My hands were constantly covered in cuts and splinters. I couldn't afford proper health insurance, so I got real good at first aid. My parents thought I was crazy. They wanted me to use my construction experience to get a real job with benefits. My dad kept sending me listings for project manager positions. Can't blame them. They grew up poor and valued stability above all else. But I had this vision, you know. I could see exactly what I wanted to build, both with my hands and as a business. Slowly, things started working out. Word spread about my stuff. I specialize in these live-edge tables and custom built-ins that rich Portland hipsters go crazy for. My first big break came when a local restaurant owner asked me to make tables for his new farm-to-table place. He paid half up front, which was more cash than I'd seen in months. Those tables led to more restaurant work. Then residential clients started coming in. I started getting bigger commissions, hired a couple apprentices, moved to a better workshop. Last year, my business cleared $320,000, and I personally took home about $140,000 after expenses and paying my guys. Not Jeff Bezos money, but considering where I started, I'm pretty damn proud. My friends Mike and Josh always joke that success would change me. But honestly, I'm still the same guy who likes video games on weekends and driving my beat-up 2008 Tacoma. My only real splurge was buying a small house last year. Nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom craftsman that needs work, but it's mine, you know. I've always been careful with money. Growing up, watching my parents struggle with debt teaches you that lesson hard and early. So, I kept my expenses low, invested back in the business, and built up a decent emergency fund. Never thought that fund would end up saving me from the biggest mistake of my life. About 18 months ago, I met Vanessa at a friend's housewarming party. She was this stunning 28-year-old who worked as a marketing consultant, which I later realized meant she mostly posted on Instagram and occasionally helped businesses with their social media. The moment she walked in, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She had this perfect blonde hair, wore these designer clothes that hugged her curves just right, and had this laugh that made everyone turn and look. Vanessa was way out of my league. At least that's what I thought. I'm just an average-looking dude with sawdust perpetually stuck in my flannel shirts. But for some reason, when I started talking about my furniture business, she seemed genuinely interested, asked smart questions, touched my arm a lot, laughed at my dumb jokes. By the end of the night, we'd exchanged numbers, and I was pinching myself. Our first date was at this fancy restaurant downtown that I'd never been to, the kind with tiny portions and $25 mocktails. She ordered the most expensive items on the menu without even glancing at the price. And I remember thinking, shit, this is going to hurt, but figured it was worth it. The bill came to $320, which was about what I made from a small side table back then. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront. She linked her arm through mine and asked more about my business. How much did I make? Did I have employees? Who were my clients? At the time, I thought she was just curious about my life. Now I realize she was doing inventory. The next few dates followed a similar pattern. Expensive restaurants, lots of questions about my finances, and her always forgetting her wallet. But man, she was intoxicating. Way more sophisticated than the women I usually dated. She knew about wine, art, fashion, all the stuff I knew nothing about. Made me feel like I was leveling up in life just by being with her. One night about 2 months in, she invited me to her apartment for the first time. It was this sleek downtown loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture that looked expensive but uncomfortable. The place screamed money, which confused me because she'd mentioned business was slow. How do you afford this place? I asked, genuinely curious. She laughed, running her hand along the marble kitchen counter. Daddy helps with rent. He knows how important image is in my industry. That should have been my first real warning sign. But when a gorgeous woman is unbuttoning your shirt and leading you to her bedroom, you don't exactly stop to analyze her financial arrangements. The relationship moved quickly after that. Within 6 months, she was practically living at my place. She kept complaining that my house was too small, my furniture too rustic. That's literally what I make for a living, and my kitchen needed updating, but I was so caught up in having this beautiful, seemingly accomplished woman in my life that I just nodded and promised we'd upgrade eventually. Looking back, there were red flags from the beginning. She'd forget her wallet constantly. She'd talk about these luxury vacations she wanted to take. She'd make comments about my truck being cute but so old, or how my house had so much potential, code for, this place is a dump. But she was gorgeous, charming, and seemed to genuinely care about me. So, I ignored all that. After dating for about 8 months, I proposed. Nothing fancy. Just took her to the coast for a weekend. Got down on one knee on the beach at sunset. The ring cost me $8,500, 3 months of saving up and eating peanut butter and jelly for lunch. It wasn't the biggest diamond, but it was quality, and I was proud I could afford it. Her reaction was mixed. She said yes, cried, hugged me tight. But later that night, I caught her looking at the ring with a slight frown. Is something wrong? I asked. No, it's beautiful, she said quickly. Just smaller than I expected. But it's fine. Quality over quantity, right? She posted about 50 pictures on Instagram, tagging some jewelry designer I'd never heard of with #inspired #goals. That night, she started planning our wedding immediately, talking about venues that cost more than my annual salary. Wedding planning was a nightmare from day one. Vanessa wanted this massive affair at a vineyard that would have cost over $65,000. When I suggested something smaller, she pouted for days. Don't you want me to have my dream wedding? Don't you think I'm worth it? I eventually compromised on a $40,000 budget, which still made me sweat bullets. She chose a venue that required a $15,000 deposit, non-refundable. Her dress alone was $4,500. Every time I questioned a cost, she'd make me feel cheap or like I didn't really love her. If you think this is expensive, wait until you see what kids cost, she'd joke. But there was always this edge to her voice, like she was testing me, seeing how much I'd be willing to spend on her. Then she started bringing her parents around more often. Richard and Diane Mercer were exactly what you'd expect from their names, privileged, appearance obsessed, and completely out of touch with reality. Richard was a real estate agent who spent more time on the golf course than actually selling houses. He wore those pastel-colored pants and always had a deep tan regardless of the season. Diane had that frozen look of someone who's had so much plastic surgery that basic facial expressions require conscious effort. The first time they came to my house for dinner, I could see them mentally calculating my net worth and finding it lacking. Diane kept touching my furniture and asking if it was from a catalog. Richard asked pointed questions about my business, revenue, growth, projections, client demographics. It felt more like a business meeting than a family dinner. After they left, Vanessa said, "They're just looking out for me. Daddy says a man should be able to provide a certain lifestyle." I thought I was doing pretty well, I said, feeling defensive. I own my business, my house, have no debt. She patted my cheek like I was a child. Of course you are, for someone with your background. They just want to make sure I'll be taken care of. Then came the weird demands. First, it was that she needed to approve all furniture designs before I made them for clients. Then, she wanted access to all the business accounts just in case something happens to you. She started showing up at my workshop unannounced, critiquing my employees' work and suggesting I raise prices. I pushed back on these, which led to our first major fights. The pattern was always the same. She'd make an unreasonable demand. I'd refuse. She'd explode with anger, then give me the silent treatment for days. And finally, I'd compromise just to keep the peace. One night, I overheard her on the phone with her mom. "No, he's still being difficult about it." "I know, Mom. Don't worry, I'll work on him. By the time the wedding comes around, he'll be much more flexible." I pretended not to hear, but that conversation stuck with me. What exactly was she planning to make me flexible about? Things really went to hell about 3 months before the wedding. We were sitting in my living room one evening, me sketching a design for a client's entertainment center, her scrolling through Pinterest wedding boards and occasionally showing me pictures of centerpieces that all looked exactly the same to me. "Babe," she said in that sweet voice that always meant trouble was coming. "I've been thinking about how we could thank my parents for all their help with the wedding." I looked up from my sketch. Didn't we already book them that weekend at that spa resort place as a thank you? I dropped $1,200 on that gift, which seemed plenty generous considering they weren't actually contributing a dime to our wedding. Yeah, but I was thinking of something more meaningful. She put down her phone and gave me this look like she was about to suggest something brilliant. What if you made my dad a partner in your business? I literally laughed, thinking it was a joke. You're kidding, right? Her face got serious. No, I'm completely serious. Daddy has always wanted to own part of a business, and this would mean so much to him, just like a 25% share or something small. I put down my pencil. Vanessa, your dad is a real estate agent who knows nothing about furniture. Why would I make him a partner in my business? Because he's going to be family, she said like I was being dense. And he has so many connections with wealthy clients. He could bring you so much business. If he wants to refer clients, great. But I'm not giving away a quarter of my company that I built from nothing. Her face changed then, a look I'd never seen before, cold, calculating. I thought you were generous and caring. I guess I was wrong. This isn't about generosity, I said, trying to stay calm. This is about the business I've spent 8 years building from scratch. Your dad hasn't invested time, money, or effort in it. Why would he get ownership? Because I said so, she snapped, suddenly dropping the sweet act. God, do you always have to be so selfish? Most men would be grateful to have my father's expertise. What expertise in real estate? This is a furniture business. She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. For the first time, I seriously questioned whether I should marry this woman. That night was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, she brought it up constantly, each time with a new angle. Daddy could help you expand to Seattle. Mommy knows investors who could take your business to the next level. Don't you want us to build wealth as a family? One particularly disturbing conversation happened after I caught her looking through my business contracts. What are you doing with those? I asked. She didn't even look embarrassed. Just trying to understand the business better. These client contracts are really one-sided in your favor. You know, you could be charging much more. Those rates are fair. I'm not price gouging people just because I can. She rolled her eyes. This is why you need Daddy's help. You don't understand how to maximize profit. Once he's a partner, we can restructure everything to be more beneficial. Beneficial to who? Not my clients, clearly. To us, our family. Don't you want us to be wealthy? I want us to be comfortable, and I want to run an ethical business. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. She gave me the cold look again. We'll see about that. About 2 months before the wedding, I came home from the workshop to find Vanessa sitting with her parents in my living room. They had bottles of sparkling water and these weird expectant smiles. There he is, boomed her dad. Richard, a fake tan guy in his 60s who always wore golf shirts with the collar popped. The man of the hour. I looked at Vanessa questioningly. She just smiled and patted the seat next to her. Honey, I told Mom and Dad about your amazing offer, and they're just so touched. What offer? I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. Her mother, Diane, a woman who definitely had way too much plastic surgery, leaned forward. Don't be modest, dear. Vanessa told us about making Richard a partner in your charming little furniture business. We're just overwhelmed by your generosity. I felt like I'd been punched. Vanessa was looking at me with this warning in her eyes like, don't you dare contradict me. Her parents were beaming expectantly. There must be some misunderstanding, I said slowly. I never agreed to make anyone a partner in my business. The room went silent. Richard's smile froze. Diane's eyebrows tried to raise but couldn't move because of the Botox. But Vanessa said, Richard began. Vanessa was mistaken, I cut in, looking directly at her. We discussed it, but I made it clear that wasn't something I was willing to do. Vanessa laughed nervously. Honey, don't be silly. Of course, you agreed. You were just working out the details. No, I absolutely did not agree, I said firmly. And I'm honestly shocked that you told them I did. What followed was one of the most uncomfortable evenings of my life. Her parents left quickly. And then Vanessa and I had the biggest fight we'd ever had. How could you embarrass me like that? She screamed, throwing a decorative pillow at me. How could you lie to your parents about something so serious? I shot back. You put me in an impossible position. I just knew you'd eventually see reason. Daddy was so excited. Now he thinks you're some kind of selfish. I don't care what your dad thinks. This is my business. Mine. I built it from nothing, and I'm not giving pieces of it away as wedding favors. She started crying. Then those fake tears I'd come to recognize as her go-to manipulation tactic. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Daddy's business hasn't been doing well, and he needs this. If you really loved me, you'd help my family. And there it was. The real reason behind this whole charade. Her father's business was failing, and they saw mine as a lifeboat. So that's what this is about, I said quietly. Your dad's in financial trouble and you want me to bail him out by giving him part of my company. It's not like that. She sniffled, but her eyes gave her away. That's exactly what it's like. You're not marrying me because you love me. You're marrying me because I have something your family needs. That's not fair, she cried. I do love you. This would just be a bonus for all of us. She stormed out and didn't come back until the next day, acting like nothing had happened. But things were different between us. There was this tension that never quite went away. That night, I called my best friend, Mike, and told him everything. Dude, run, was his immediate advice. This is some serious gold digger shit. She's trying to get her hooks into your business before you're even married. Imagine what she'll try to take in a divorce. I knew he was right, but I'd invested so much in this relationship. The non-refundable venue deposit, the emotional investment, the fear of starting over at 34. So, I tried to convince myself this was just pre-wedding stress and things would get better. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The next few weeks were a cold war. Vanessa would bring up her father's partnership every few days, each time more insistent than the last. I kept refusing, and she'd either give me the silent treatment or start crying about how I didn't respect her family. Then, she changed tactics. She started mentioning how some of her ex-boyfriends had been so generous with their families, how her friend Jessica's husband had bought her parents a vacation home, how family-oriented men understood the importance of sharing success. I started noticing other disturbing behaviors, too. She'd taken to examining my business contracts when I wasn't looking. I caught her going through my email one night. She kept pushing me to add her name to my business checking account for emergencies. One night, I came home early and overheard her on the phone. Yes, Daddy. I'm working on it. No, he's still being stubborn. Don't worry. Once we're married, it'll be easier. Oregon is a community property state, so technically I'll own half his business anyway. I stood frozen in the hallway, blood running cold. This wasn't just about her father anymore. This was a coordinated plan to take control of my business. That night, I didn't confront her. Instead, I called a lawyer. Not my usual business attorney, but someone from a different firm who specialized in both business law and divorces. I explained the situation and asked for advice. First, she said, don't get married. At least not until this is resolved. Second, document everything. Oregon isn't actually a community property state, but if you're married and the business grows, she could claim a portion of that growth in a divorce. And if you ever added her or her father's name to any business documents, that complicates things further. I started recording our conversations, legal in Oregon with one-party consent, and saving all texts and emails. I installed a small security camera in my home office where I kept my business documents. Paranoid maybe, but I was starting to realize I was dealing with someone who wouldn't hesitate to go behind my back. Then one evening about 6 weeks before the wedding, it all came to a head. We were eating dinner, or rather I was eating, while Vanessa pushed food around her plate and sighed dramatically. So I talked to my lawyer today, she said casually. I looked up from my pasta. Your lawyer? About what? About how to structure the business partnership with Daddy. He suggested a simple transfer of 30% ownership would be easiest. I put down my fork. Vanessa, there isn't going to be a business partnership with your dad. I've told you this at least 20 times. She took a sip of her sparkling water, looking at me over the glass, and I've decided that's not acceptable. Excuse me? If you really loved me, you'd do this for my family. So, I've made a decision. She set down her glass carefully. Either you sign over 30% of your business to my father before the wedding or there won't be a wedding. I stared at her, not quite believing what I was hearing. Are you seriously giving me an ultimatum right now? Call it whatever you want, she said with a shrug. But I need a man who understands family values. So, what's it going to be? I stood up slowly. Let me get this straight. You want me to give away nearly a third of the business I've spent 8 years building to your father, who has contributed exactly nothing to it, or you'll cancel our wedding. Yes, she said, examining her manicure. And honestly, if you're going to be so selfish about it, maybe we should just call things off anyway. I looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly saw her clearly for the first time. This beautiful, entitled woman who viewed my life's work as something she could carve up and distribute to her family as favors. You're right, I said quietly. We should call it off. Her head snapped up, eyes widening. What? The wedding is off. We're done. I'll eat the deposit on the venue, but it's a small price to pay to not make the biggest mistake of my life. She stared at me in shock, then her face contorted with rage. You can't be serious. After everything I've done for you, you'd be nothing without me. What exactly have you done for me? Vanessa? Spent my money? Tried to give away my business? Made me feel inadequate at every turn? She stood up, knocking over her water glass. You'll regret this. My father has connections. He'll ruin you. Get out, I said calmly. Take whatever personal items you have here and get out. We're done. This isn't over, she hissed, grabbing her purse. You have no idea who you're messing with. As the door slammed behind her, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Enormous. Overwhelming relief. Like I just dodged a bullet aimed straight at my heart. The next few weeks were chaos. Vanessa went nuclear. She badmouthed me to all our mutual friends, telling them I was abusive, cheap, and had cheated on her. Complete lies. She tried to get refunds on all the wedding arrangements in her name only, pocketing the money. She even showed up at my workshop one day, screaming at my employees about how I'd promised her father a stake in the business. You don't know who you're dealing with, she screamed as my foreman Dave gently but firmly escorted her out. My father will destroy your pathetic little business. Her parents got involved, too. Richard called me, threatening vague legal action for breach of promise or some nonsense. Diane spread rumors among her social circle that I was unstable and violent, which somehow got back to some of my clients. One afternoon, I returned to my workshop to find several pieces of expensive lumber had been vandalized. Deep scratches across the surface that rendered them unusable. Security cameras showed someone in a hoodie, face hidden, but the figure was small and moved like a woman. I couldn't prove it was Vanessa, but the timing was suspicious. What they didn't count on was that I'd been documenting everything. Every text where Vanessa demanded part of my business, every email where she schemed about how to get me to sign over ownership, and most importantly, a recorded conversation where she explicitly stated her plan to get Daddy in on the business now. Then after the wedding, we can push him out and take control ourselves. I'd recorded that conversation legally. Oregon is a one-party consent state after I started getting suspicious of her motives. It wasn't something I'd planned to ever use, but man, was I glad I had it. The breaking point came when Vanessa somehow got hold of my client list and started contacting them directly, telling them I was having personal issues that might affect their orders. That's when I decided enough was enough. I sent cease and desist letters to both Vanessa and her parents, clearly outlining that their harassment and interference with my business had to stop or I'd pursue legal action. I included snippets of the evidence I had, just enough to show them I wasn't bluffing. They ignored me, so I took the next step. Through a mutual friend who worked in real estate, I learned that Richard wasn't just a real estate agent. He was actually in serious financial trouble. His agency was failing and he'd been banking on getting a piece of my business to solve his problems. This explained a lot about their desperation. I also discovered that Richard had been operating without a proper broker's license for the past year. It had been suspended for ethics violations, but he kept working anyway. This is a major legal issue in real estate. Now, I'm not normally a vindictive guy, but they'd pushed me too far. I compiled all the evidence of Richard's license violation and forwarded it to the State Real Estate Commission. I also reached out to several clients he was currently working with, found through social media, and innocently mentioned they might want to verify his license status. The result was catastrophic for him. His license violation became public. His pending deals fell through and he was hit with a $25,000 fine. Their financial situation, which was already precarious, completely collapsed. As for Vanessa, I forwarded our text exchanges to our mutual friends, particularly the ones where she outlined her plan to take control of my business. I didn't have to say anything. Her own words did all the damage. She lost most of her friends, and her marketing consultant reputation took a major hit when people realized how manipulative she was. About 2 months after our breakup, I got the first desperate text from Vanessa. Can we talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't respond. A week later, I'm so sorry for everything. I was under a lot of pressure from my parents. Please call me. Ignored that, too. Then came the desperate voicemails. She was crying in most of them, talking about how much she missed me, how she'd made a terrible mistake. In one particularly pathetic message, she actually said, "I never wanted Daddy to have your business." That was all his idea, I swear. I saved every message, but never responded. Eventually, they stopped. I thought that was the end of it until 3 months after our breakup. I was working late at my workshop when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door to find Richard standing there, looking like he'd aged 10 years. His tan had faded, his golf shirt was wrinkled, and he had the desperate look of a man who'd lost everything. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice lacking the booming confidence I remembered. Against my better judgment, I let him in. "I've lost everything," he said without preamble. "My business is gone. We had to sell the house. Diane's left me. It's all falling apart." I just looked at him, waiting. "I know you reported me to the commission, he continued. I deserved it. What we tried to do to you, what I pushed Vanessa to do, it was wrong. Yes, it was, I agreed. I need help, he admitted, his voice breaking. A loan, a job, anything. Nobody will touch me in real estate anymore. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who tried to steal my business was now begging me for a job. I might have something, I said slowly. I need someone to sweep the floors, organize the lumber racks, clean the toilets. Pay is $15 per hour, no benefits. His face fell, but he nodded. I'll take it. One condition, I added. You sign a notarized statement admitting that you and Vanessa conspired to try to take my business under false pretenses, just for my records. He hesitated, then nodded again. Fine, whatever it takes. So now Richard works for me, doing the jobs nobody else wants. Every day he watches me run my business, the one he tried to steal. He's a silent reminder to everyone in the shop of what happens when you try to take what isn't yours. As for Vanessa, I heard she had to move back in with her mom, who's renting a small apartment now. Her marketing consultant business dried up when people found out what she tried to do to me. Last I heard, she's working as a receptionist at a dentist office and driving a 12-year-old Honda instead of the BMW she had when we were together. One day, about 6 months after everything went down, she showed up at my workshop again, not screaming this time, but meek, wearing minimal makeup and clothes that weren't designer for once. Can we talk? She asked when I came out to the front room. There's nothing to talk about, I said. Please, she said, voice breaking. I've lost everything. My friends, my reputation, my business. I'm working for $14 an hour answering phones and living in my mom's spare bedroom. I need closure. Closure? I laughed. You tried to steal my business. You threatened me. You harassed my clients. And now you want closure. She started crying. And for once, I could tell the tears were real. I was stupid. I was raised to think that using people was normal. My parents always taught me to look for what I could get from others. I didn't know any better. That might explain your behavior, but it doesn't excuse it. I know, she whispered. I miss you. The real you, not the business or the money. I miss your laugh and how you'd explain woodworking processes to me, even though I never really understood them. I miss watching you sketch designs with that little furrow in your brow. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered all the manipulation, the lies, the attempts to steal everything I'd worked for. If that was true, you wouldn't have tried to take my business. You wouldn't have seen me as a meal ticket. You would have loved me for who I am, not what I could give you. She had no response to that. Go home, Vanessa, I said finally. Find a therapist. Figure out who you are without using other people, and never contact me again. As she walked out, Richard came in from the back room with a broom in hand. Father and daughter locked eyes, both fallen from their pedestals of entitlement. Neither spoke. Vanessa turned and hurried out, shoulders shaking with sobs. Richard went back to sweeping. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you plan. It's just letting terrible people face the consequences of their actions while you continue to succeed. My business is doing better than ever. I've expanded to a bigger workshop, hired 3 more craftsmen, and I'm dating again. This time with a woman who actually supports my work instead of seeing it as something she can take. Emily is an elementary school art teacher who loves creating things with her hands. She understands the value of making something from nothing, and she's happy with pizza and Netflix instead of fancy restaurants with $25 mocktails. Last month, Richard came to me with a surprising proposal. He'd been learning about woodworking during his time at the shop, watching my craftsmen work, studying how we do things. He asked if he could apprentice properly, learn the trade. Why should I trust you? I asked. Because I've lost everything that made me who I was, he said simply. My money, my status, my marriage. I've got nothing left except the work I do here. And for the first time in my life, I'm creating something instead of just selling things other people create. I thought about it for a day, then agreed to let him train under my most experienced craftsman. He's actually not bad with his hands now that his ego isn't in the way. Sometimes I look around my workshop, at the business I built from nothing, at my talented team, at Richard learning humility through honest work, and I can't help but feel grateful for the bullet I dodged. That $15,000 venue deposit I lost? Best money I ever spent. Life has a funny way of working out.